Welcome to the International Teacher Podcast with your host, Matt the Family Guy, Kent the Cat Guy, Jacqueline from JP Mint, and Greg the Single Guy, bringing you episodes from around the world about the best kept secret in education. You've got it, international teaching. Welcome to the show.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the ITP. I'm Kent the Cat Guy. I'm bringing us in. I want to say good morning to JP Mint. Hey, JP.
Hello, good morning from Mexico.
I would like to now bring in Greg the Single Guy. Good evening, Greg.
How you doing, Kent? Good to be here.
So good to be here, and I'd like to now bring in our special guests coming in all the way from the desert a couple miles away. Welcome, Ana and Cam. Come on in, Ana and Cam.
Hi.
Thank you. It's good to be here. It's good to chat with you guys.
Thanks for being here. Ana, we'll just start with you. I was wondering if you could both tell us just a little bit about yourself. What did you do before you became teachers, where you come from, maybe just a little something to introduce you to the ITP crowd.
Sure, I can start. Well, I was born and raised in the Dominican Republic. I moved away for grad school when I was 24. I actually met Cameron in grad school, but at the time I was not in education at all. I was getting a master's in international development, had been working in nonprofits for a while. We started dating. He went his own way, I went my own way, and then we became more serious, we got engaged. He moved to the Dominican Republic to be a teacher, and then we moved to China, and that's where I transitioned into teaching. I started, the slow burn of, I started subbing, and then got into a program, then student teaching, then intern, and now finally, after a couple of years, a more established teacher.
And now they're the power teaching couple.
Cam, tell us a few words about yourself.
Me? So I came from a teacher family. My dad was a superintendent. I grew up in a real small town in the eastern part of Washington State with about 1,500 people, with one public school. We had 26
Which
other
school
kids
district was that, Cam?
It's called Ritzville School District.
I came from Mercer Island.
Okay, so we're about an hour west of Spokane, right on I-90.
All right.
Yeah.
So how does a kid from Ritzville, 1,500 people, Washington State, end up, I could see why you might become a teacher. How do you end up going to the DR? Dominican Republic?
Yeah.
Well, I went elsewhere first. So I wasn't going to be a teacher. A lot of teachers' kids are like, oh, I don't want to be a teacher. My parents are teachers. And then we all become teachers anyway. I ended up at the UW in Seattle. I had a friend at the time. His parents and my parents are good friends. And he's about, 12, 13 years older, 14 maybe. And he said, all right, why don't you come visit me in Hong Kong? So I was 20. It was my first trip abroad. And him and his wife at the time were at their 7th or 8th year at Hong Kong International School. I was like, wow, this is pretty awesome. You guys have a pretty cool life here. That was pretty much it. So from there, I got my undergrad degree in European studies, and I moved to Russia to do a Fulbright in teaching English. And that was after I met Ana. So while I was there, I finished my master's, and then I moved to the DR to get my first real teaching job, teaching 4th grade at a small international school of sorts. That was pretty much all she wrote. Once you live in a small town and you see what else is out there, it's either you're terrified of it and you go back to that small town, or you can't get enough. And for me, I just couldn't get enough. So I left the U.S. when I was 24 and never looked back.
So let me see if I have this right. You met Ana in the States, is that right?
In Seattle.
We met when we were both in grad school, but for different reasons.
Okay, so let me see if I get this straight now. So, Ana, you grew up in the Dominican Republic. You went to, high school there, and then you went to college. Did you go from the DR to Seattle, the Pacific Northwest?
Yeah. I did all my education up to that point in the Dominican. I got my undergrad there. I went to grad school to Seattle, it was a big adjustment. Yeah, I had been to the US before, but I had only been east. West, with all those trees, was very new for me. West, with that little sun, was very new to me. And of course, like the international teacher's office at UW, like when they see international students that come from sunny places, they're like, okay, here's where the light therapy lamps are. Please go there and don't get depressed, okay? It's very much like that.
There's a reason why Twilight was filmed in the upper northwest corner.
Oh, yeah.
There is.
We went to Forks on like a spring break, actually, and went to like all those locations, like just a little after the craze had died a little bit. But yeah, it's
a little
just
Twilight
as great
fan
as
girl.
Nice.
So is your current location the first time you guys traveled overseas together?
No. So we moved abroad. So Cameron, well, technically the Dominican Republic is abroad for Cameron. So
Yeah, for
he
me, it
moved
was the
there with
Dominican
me.
together. I said, yeah, after the DR. So I was living in Russia, doing my English teaching. Went to the Dominican, which for me is abroad, not for her. And then we went to Shanghai for 3 years. From there, it was Korea for 2, and then a short stop over in Hawaii for 3, where we lived through most of the pandemic while we finished her U.S. citizenship. And then now we're going to go into year 4 here in the desert. Next year, it'll be year 4.
So, Anna, were you a trailing spouse when you guys went to Shanghai then?
Yes,
that
I
right?
was.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how was that? I mean, Cam, you went and did you teach elementary when you went to Shanghai?
Yeah. It was elementary for me.
Okay. And Anna, you went as a trailing spouse. Did you end up working at that school doing anything while Cam was teaching?
Well, so at first I was working remotely, but it was not a paid position. So eventually I was like, okay, I love this job, but this is not sustainable because it doesn't pay me any money and Shanghai is expensive. So I want a job that pays me. So eventually, the school invited me to sub. It's hard to find subs in international schools. So I started I remember my first assignment was in 5th grade. So I was like, okay, well, I'll do it. They're a little older. I don't know, but okay, I'll just give it a try. Eventually, it was more middle and high school. And then when we were in our 2nd year in Shanghai, I was like, okay, well, I think I can hack this. I left my remote job and then I started looking at programs that would give me a teaching certification that I could do online. And so I enrolled in a program at Montana State, completed that, and then I did my student teaching in a completely different school across town in Shanghai.
The reason I asked you that is because we do have a few listeners, even recently. We've gotten a few requests for us to talk more about trailing spouses. And I know that you've already experienced that, and it's good to hear you mention that because not every school, but a lot of schools overseas, they want their new hires to bring their families, right? They want you to have the family package. It's better for the school because they'll keep you. They're more invested with you, right? Your Cam's going to stay there if you're also with him and you're trying to work it out. So they offer you maybe to sub, and that's awesome because not only did you sub for them, but you also started off on your teacher journey and you ended up being an international teacher too. So I think it's great to hear from you. We need to hit more of those specifically, but I thank you for sharing that little tidbit of the story because it does mean a lot.
And it's funny that you mention it because when Cameron was interviewing at his first job fair, it was one of the first pieces of advice that we got. We were advised by a head of school, like, okay, Anna, you're not teaching. So yeah, they're not interviewing you technically, but if you can sit in on the interview so that you can understand what you guys are getting into as a unit, sit in as many interviews as you can. And that was really eye-opening and it helped me understand what it would really mean. In the end, a lot of the admin that interviewed us, like they asked me what I thought about things and how did I see myself in those cities, etc. And I think that it was a really valuable part of the process. I mean, of course, like at first when I spent 8 hours at home without talking to anybody. That was tough at first and it was kind of tricky. And of course, there's all those waves of like, I don't have any friends and what am I doing here? And what happens if I don't meet anybody? But, eventually that got a lot better as soon as I started like plugging myself in the school community, and I was at school all the time. So it was like, well, yeah, of course you work here. And it's like, we would go out for like teacher appreciation days at restaurants, and they're like, oh, you sub? Oh yeah, you're a teacher. You count. It's okay.
Got it. Yeah. JP, you wanted to mention something, right?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a little bit more detail about the teaching credential you got and how did that work out? Because I've never heard of this Montana program and I don't know if it still exists.
Unfortunately, the program, to my knowledge, closed a couple of years ago, but it was called the Northern Plains Transition to Teaching Program at Montana State. And I'm going to be very honest with you, I only chose it because it was the most affordable thing I could find at the time. and because the Montana license had reciprocity with whatever states were most likely for us to ever return to in the U.S., so like Washington and Oregon and that kind of thing. So I was like, okay, fine, this makes some sense. So the focus of the program is, or was at the time, to kind of like give teaching licenses to people that were either going to Montana, South Dakota, and Wyoming, but they had worked with teachers abroad before. So there were a few components on like comparative international education and evaluating tests like PISA and like the way that international schools approach education, comparing learning models across countries, etc. So that was pretty cool. It was a pretty well-rounded program, I would say.
And was it fully remote because you were in China at the time?
It was, and that was very important to me, was like to find something that didn't require me to go back to the US to do student teaching. A, because I didn't want to like go away from Cameron, and B, because I didn't really want to go do student teaching in the US. Mm-hmm. So I did some research and they did mention the school where I ended up student teaching. I contacted them like, hey, look, I'm going to start this program. I would like to do student teaching down the line with you guys. Is that possible? So they talked to their AP coordinator, the head of the department, who had student teachers from that program before. And they're like, yeah, just let us know when you're ready to start and you'll be fine.
So you student taught at a different school from Camden.
Yeah, I did. It was a long commute, but worth it because it allowed me to do a pretty nice split of like regular classes and also advanced placement. And at the time I was aiming for more specialized high school social studies teaching. So I wanted to start strong with like more demanding curriculum from the get-go in student teaching.
Yeah, you seem like you're secondary.
Here in the desert, what are your current teaching assignments?
7th grade.
Oh, middle school.
7th grade,
Cam, you're doing
everything?
Elementary.
Nope, I'm doing middle school as well.
Oh no, social studies for me and for Cameron too, but he's in 6th grade.
Yeah. So this is my first middle school job. When we came from Hawaii, I was teaching grade 6 elementary. And so this is my transition into middle school. I'm hoping to continue that in the future. You know, whenever we move on, we would like to maybe her work high school and me stay with middle school. But 2 middle school social studies teachers is a bit more complicated. So I'm also, prepared to go back to elementary, if it's a good fit for us.
If it's the right fit?
The Right Fit, www.amazon.com, or wherever you buy your finer books. Finding the Right Fit by Greg Lemoyne, M.A., M.D., Ph.D., M.A.S.D., A.S.P. Some of those might not be true.
A lot of those aren't true, Ken. Thanks for that plug, buddy. Yeah, Cam and Anna, we always do that.
Anna and Cam, tell us a little bit about how you're enjoying your current assignment, the country, the coworkers, the school. Are you happy?
Can you see Kent and Greg without pants on from where you are right now?
Oh, my God. Our listeners are like groaning right now going, oh, my God.
You know what? We bake ourselves on honesty here, single guy. Okay. How is
try and answer that long question, Cam and Anna. Yeah.
It's pretty good. We've been in the tropics for most of our career. And so it's a little bit warmer here than what we're used to. The life is pretty good. We like our school quite a bit. We have great admin, which to me is the hallmark of a great school. I would go anywhere pretty much as long as I know that I have good colleagues and good admin. Since we spend so much of our time at our workplaces, you want to be happy there. For me, I think that holds true where we are. No school is perfect. Each school has its challenges. There's no shortage of those here either, both academically and, at school, but also personally. Where we live, it can be a little dry at times, and, maybe a trip across the bridge every month or two, is helpful to.
Okay. Not referring to the
life.
humidity. Notice how I picked up on that.
I was
Notice how I
like,
picked up on that.
Like
I like the way
desert.
Cam started. You started off, Cam, saying, we're used to the tropics, but it's a little bit warmer here. My God, it was like 120 degrees. I saw a man burst into flames on the street today. Oh, my. It just got hot right now. Just like this week, it just got hot.
It is hot. But where I grew up too at Eastern Washington, it wasn't uncommon to reach 105, 108 either. So, but it wasn't this humid. So I grew up with a lot of heat. But also, we get down to minus 10 sometimes the winter. So balance.
How about you, Ana Dominicana, here in the desert? How you feeling?
I think that, well, for us, since we are used to the heat with very high humidity, this is very manageable heat. TMI, but I do sweat a lot easier in dry heat, so I don't love that part. But, dry heat for us is usually more manageable. I just try to stay in the shade, but when the humidity strikes, it's tough. For me, the dust can be tough because I have a lot of allergies, so that part of the year is not fun. Other than that, I don't really mind the weather. There are moments, and I was telling Cameron this because I remember when we lived in the DR, he always said, I just don't like the fact that it's always sunny because I feel like time is never going by. There's no variation on that. And now, after a number of years in the same environment, I get it. I'm like, oh, that's what he means. It really, unless you are paying attention to the differences in temperature, time is not going by if you're only going by the sun. Now it's okay, are we in the furnace time of the year? Are we in the cooler time of the year where you can sit outside? And that's where that time is going by.
What I really like about what you said is, and I relate to what you said earlier, is that you can live anywhere as long as your job is comfortable, as long as you your admin and your school and your job is what you want, because you spend so much time there. For you, you've been to different countries so far. You've been to 4 or 5 that you've been living in and teaching in, and that rang a bell with me, right? And I think it does with JP and Kent. We've all lived in some different places, and that for me is the key. Job is what you need to have.
It's one of those things too where, when we're online and we're giving advice to people, or, we're just browsing subreddits about international education, and people are like, oh, I want to go here, here, and here. And one of the things we often say, and other people do too, is that don't keep your blinders on. There's so many great places out there that you never would have thought of with great schools. And yeah, it may not be your dream location. I don't know that, maybe Kazakhstan is the dream location for anyone, but it doesn't mean it can't be a great fit for you. When we moved to China, we initially said, no, China is not for us. Not at all. We didn't want to go. And then before the job fair came out, I think it was maybe a month, James Bond Skyfall got released. And there's a scene where he's in Shanghai. And we're like, that looks pretty cool. So then we interviewed with the school in Shanghai. We're like, okay, it looks not what we expected. Let's give it a try. Maybe we'll meet James Bond. And we loved it. It was a great
And
city.
did you? Did you?
Well, we did have a parent of one of my students who everyone said was Daniel Craig because he wasn't quite Daniel Craig, but it was pretty much a spitting image in my opinion. So I'm going to say yes, we did.
I'm just going to tell
Hey,
everybody
Cam.
you did that. Yeah.
Cam and Anna, you've touched on it a couple times, but let's dive into it. Let's talk about the job fairs and where you went, because Greg, this is one of his favorite topics, is what job fair did you go to? Can you tell us a little bit about that experience or those experiences?
Yeah. So we've been to 3 fairs. I got hired initially as an intern before I went to Russia at a school in Bangladesh. And then Fulbright came through and my friend said, go to Fulbright. But so I didn't go to a fair that year, but we've been to 3 fairs. We've been to all 3 search fairs. We've been to Boston, we've been to Melbourne, and we've been to Bangkok. all in very different circumstances. When we went to Cambridge, we were leaving the Dominican, and it was me as a teacher, Anna with a trailing spouse. And I'll let her talk more about some of the fairs as well. We went to Melbourne. It was her as a newly minted teacher, which presented its own issues when you have a teacher with experience and one without. And then we went to Bangkok, which is super competitive, but we were also looking for a very specific fit because at the time we were finishing her U.S. citizenship, and we were hoping to find a school that would fulfill the requirements that would allow us to finish that while being abroad. And so those types of schools, as you probably know, are very few and far between, those full-on embassy schools or certain nonprofit schools. And so we've been to 3 fairs under 3 very different circumstances.
That is so cool. I'm trying to picture each time you go to a job fair, it's been completely different circumstances, but also completely different job fairs. So if we can, do you think we can unpack a little bit? So Anna, can you tell us about your Cambridge experience? What was that like as a trailing spouse?
Yeah. So, the plan was just for me to tag along. I technically didn't have anything to bring to the picture, but it was just tagging along and kind of really understanding what it was really about, because it was for me kind of scary. So I was just there to kind of provide admin support, help him write thank you notes and copies of resumes, and hold, kind of split up so that I could sign him up for interviews in one spot and he could go do sign-ups in another spot of the room, which was kind of helpful because it helped us.
Anna,
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you pay admission to those fairs when you are on that kind of trailing spouse role?
No.
Okay.
Not that I can recall.
And did you interview together, or did that come later, towards later on in the interview process?
No, I think she went to every interview I did.
I went to every interview.
I would hope so.
I'm convinced that they only hired me because of her.
Lies.
Well, obviously, right, Kim?
Yeah, talked to her for a few minutes, and she's the one they want, not me.
They're like, okay, how do we get you in the classroom?
So she came to every interview with me.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, so I was kind of there in a way to observe, but also to, in many ways, it helped, I think, to have that conversation of okay, how is this going to look for us as a move beyond the classroom? Is this going to be a good personal move for us? Is it feasible for us with me not working? And there were some schools from the get-go that were very honest. Were Cameron, you're a great fit, but honestly, with one salary, you guys would struggle. So that's a decision that you have to make. We don't know. Or they would say well, Anna, if you're not working, we don't know how you would feel, because there's not a lot for you to do, or there aren't many people that look like you, so that might be a little isolating. So it was really great to see how honest school leadership was in all the interviews on okay, beyond the school, beyond the bubble, this is what it could look like. A, if you're not working, B, being a person of color, etc.
Yeah. And then you got to China and started doing your teaching credential.
Yeah.
Got your teaching credential, and then you went to Melbourne, Australia for that job fair?
Yes. So at the time we asked our associate, because I was I'm awesome and I've just done my student teaching, but of course I'm going to be applying for DP business management jobs because I can totally hack that. But in the end, our associate recommended Melbourne because it was a smaller fair, so it wasn't going to be as competitive. And because Melbourne also had intern positions, schools would hire interns. So at the time, they were okay, you know what? Try for teaching jobs. But then when we were at the fair, we were okay, this is not really moving the way that we're hoping, or we were running into a lot of schools that had positions for one of us and not the other. And so the associate at the fair was look, Anna, you need to calibrate start targeting intern positions more specifically. And that's how we ended up in the Korea job. Originally at that school, I applied for a DP business management position and I didn't get it. But they were like, well, we'll bring you in as an intern. Cameron can go to elementary. You can get IB training that way. So that's how Korea happened.
Anna, quick question for you. What is the role of an intern in international school?
That's a great question. I love answering that question on Reddit when people ask it because it depends a lot on the school. Some schools have very defined intern programs for specific divisions. Others don't. And so they bring in people that are newly certified to kind of get them within the school community, see what they're capable of, and then start kind of like soft assessing them for specific positions. In Korea, I ended up in elementary for my internship, which was not ideal, but I talked to my supervising teacher for student teaching, and she was like, look, I started the same way. I didn't want to do elementary. I did 2 years in second grade. I learned everything that I learned about classroom management and rapport with students in elementary. I think there could be an opportunity there. Maybe you should consider it. So I decided to take it on her advice. You know, sure enough, everything that I know about pedagogy, everything that I know about the basics of the learning process, like that foundation was really elementary. But the school was pretty much kind of building its internship program as we went in there. So we did a kind of a combination of things. There was a lot of EAL support, which I think is fairly common for interns to help with students that are new to English. There was a little bit of co-teaching on specific areas of strength. So whenever there were social studies, units of inquiry, that's where I would come in to help the teachers source materials or create assessments, etc. So I was very involved in the planning in that aspect. And then of course, you know, the regular clerical stuff that interns do, but like I love making copies and stapling things. I actually do. So I didn't really have a problem with that.
You were the official collator at the school.
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys, but I think she sounds great for an interview. I mean,
I think
JP,
she does
don't you
more
think she
work
does
as an
great?
intern than I do as a teacher.
I think she does too.
She did when she was an intern.
But now let's move to, you went to the final, latest job fair as a full-fledged teacher with experience, and that was Bangkok. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Am I still talking?
Yes.
Okay.
You're asking Cam or are you asking us?
No, I'm asking Anna because Anna was talking about each. Well, she was talking about each job fair. No, it was great.
All right, well, let's let the ladies talk for a while.
You boys, you just go and sit back and relax a little bit.
I feel like the Bangkok Fair has this reputation for being really competitive and really cutthroat. So we were a little bit hesitant because like at that time, I just had internship experience and we were very selective on our search because we were trying to stay abroad while I was still on the citizenship process, etc. So we were like, well, we don't really know what's going to happen. But sure enough, yes, it is very competitive. And to an extent, I feel like schools that early in January may be a little bit like, well, maybe we should wait a little bit longer, see what else we find in other fairs. We don't know if maybe someone is going to like pull out and, you know, not come back. And there's a lot of like, there's not that much certainty in my opinion in Bangkok, but we did interview a fair bit. We were there with colleagues from the school we were leaving, so there was a lot of like that we're all in the trenches together, and our admin was there doing their own recruitment, and they were also very helpful on like, okay, well, let me just ask that person that maybe isn't responding as quickly, let's see if they saw your application or whatever. So that was great. In the end, what happened was that we didn't get offers in any of those very selective schools that we were looking at, but I actually got an offer at a private school in Hawaii, and that's how we ended up back in the U.S.
Both the ISS and the search have generally historically been around the same time, or like back-to-back weekends, if not the same weekend.
Yeah.
From my point of view, Cam, you and Anna were very lucky because you were a teaching couple. I went to one in Bangkok in 2008 maybe. I sat there as a non-married single teacher for the first 4 days because it was a domino effect. They were trying to fill up all of the teaching couples, And I sat there for 4
So
days.
when you say you were just sitting there, you weren't getting a lot of the interview offers.
I did a lot of networking, but I literally was not interviewing very much compared to anybody else. I had like 3 different interviews initially, or 5 initially. And then at the end of the week, I was given a job offer and done 2 more interviews at the same school. I ended up going to Cambodia. But they had already hired everybody, and they had all... I mean, I went in. It was just a very strange story, but I ended up getting a job at the end of that week. But my point is that you're a teaching couple, and you're very sought after as a couple over singles many times, right? In job experiences at the job
Yeah,
fairs.
Cam, can you talk to that a little bit and maybe explain to our listeners, because you guys have lived it? Why do schools look so much? Because we've all heard it. The teaching couple without kids are the golden couple. Can you tell us a little bit more why?
So, I mean, when you've got kids, first of all, you're then costing school a little bit of money. Those children, they're happy to have you as teachers, but then take up an extra spot from a would-be paying family. So for us as 2 teachers without kids, the ideal might be elementary and, say, high school math or high school science, for example. But without 2 kids, you get to fill 2 positions. You're only taking up 1 smaller housing allowance, whereas if you have kids, you might be offered more. The school's not paying as much for the annual airfare or as insurance, and they get to fill 2 positions. So it's sort of like killing 2 birds with 1 stone in many ways. And so it really is, I think, in many respects, depending on what you teach, put you in the best position to find a job at an international school. Now, again, I think we all know that depending on what you teach, if you teach high school math, if you teach calculus or AP biology, if there's an opening and you're good at what you do, you're pretty much going to be headhunted, because it's hard to find those jobs. I know schools that are still looking to hire high school math and science. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. But I think really it comes down for us, as dinks, if you will.
I like that. Double income, no kids.
Double income, no kids. I think it comes down to a cost factor for the schools, is that we end up being the most cost effective for what they're looking for. We fill 2 spots and we save them money on the other things. So I think that's ultimately what it boils down to. But I've never been a hiring, I've never been in HR, I've never been admin. Obviously you're still looking for people and teachers who are going to be good fit at your school as well. So.
And not to mention stability, the stability of having a couple that can support each other. And, if you're having a bad day, Ana can help, talk you through it and stuff like that. So the stability and the support that's built into a couplehood.
I was going to add to that when you have a teacher with a non-teaching spouse that is potentially not working, there are also a number of factors there that may increase the risk for the school, because when you have, say, a non-working spouse that maybe doesn't have their own job, if you add maybe a person that doesn't speak either the local language or English, those are all like compounding factors that can make it even less likely for the teacher to stay if that non-working spouse doesn't find their footing. So it becomes a bigger expense for the school. It becomes a riskier investment. So when you have 2 teachers that are invested into the school because they're both working, it just becomes a less risky investment for the school overall.
All right, let's take a moment for a little commercial about how to get in touch with us. You can, of course, find all 4 of us at the itpexpat.com. That's www.itpexpat.com.
Or you could also find us at email at internationalteacherpodcast@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you.
Or if you're into Facebook, we have a new Facebook group at www.facebook.com/groups/ITPexpat, where you can find all kinds of inside information about ITP Expat.
You can also find us on Instagram at ITP Expats. That's with an S. ITP Expats is our handle.
All right. And thank you, listeners. We have over 100 countries represented by our listeners. And though we're not monetized, we are here for you. And we would like to thank all of you for listening. So let's get back to the show.
I've always had sort of a slightly a contrarian question about point of view about teaching couples versus, because you guys have been both a teaching couple and a teacher and a non-teacher couple. One of the pressures I think on teaching couples, first of all, if you work in the same building, there's always a chance that you just frustrate each other professionally at times.
I do that.
The other thing is that there's these pressure points in the year where every teacher is stressed. Report cards, end of the year, holidays,
Like
and
now.
it's kind of when you're a teacher couple,
Yes.
you both kind of come home
Compounded.
angry and frustrated some days. Whereas if only one's a teacher, it's not quite as it's not, the impact isn't quite as. What do you guys think? You've been on both sides of that. What do you think?
You're not wrong. I think, right now we just finished our report cards and all of our grading today at like 2 p.m.
Woohoo.
And you're not wrong. It does compound, but I think it's still for the best, because even if we were back in the States, for example, we might be at different schools and the cycles might not match up exactly depending if you're private or district, but you're still going through the same struggles. And at least this way, you get to commiserate together. And so you might be angry and upset and it does, flare up, but we get to, when something goes wrong, we get to vent to each other and we know exactly what we're talking about.
Support
And so
each
I
other.
think from that perspective, it's really nice, because we both come home some days and just let off steam to each other. Not about each other, but, something that happened during the day, or maybe you got a bad email. So I think it does compound at times, but I think the pros outweigh the cons. And then coming back to what JP said, the mental health aspect of when one of you is not teaching can be huge. When we were in China, it was Anna's first time really in a country that wasn't the US or the Dominican. And there was multiple moments where she would just call me in tears. One time, I'm going to share a couple, Anna, if that's okay.
Is this a mushroom story?
Well, mushroom and PJs.
Oh boy.
So one day,
Mushroom
The
and
mushroom story.
Okay.
Can we save that for Patreon?
Not that kind of mushroom.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I didn't even think
Mario
of
Brothers mushroom.
Yeah.
so we went out to eat, and a little local place, and everything's in Mandarin, and there's some pictures, and we just pointed at pictures and we ordered, and we ended up getting a type of mushroom on, I think, her dish that we had no idea was mushroom. We had no idea what it was, period. And I don't know how many, it took seconds into the meal before she just broke down and tears were everywhere. And I just sat there quietly laughing, because for me, it was a moment where I had been through plenty of moments. I'd been in Russia and other places where I'd eaten things that I won't ever eat or want to eat again. And so for me, it was like, all right, this is your moment where now you're having this cultural experience and we'll look back and laugh on it. But she didn't think it was that funny at the time.
Aw. You weren't a mushroom fan, Anna?
I was, but I just didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
Plus, you had 300 pictures on the menu, and they're all in Mandarin. And you're like, how do I say rice and a beer? I mean, they don't even bring you rice. When I was in Shanghai, we just
it's
pick
not that
out two
common.
things from the menu, and if it's like a half a cow lung or something like that, and you're like, "Ah!"
I picked the wrong picture.
So yeah, I mean, that was hard for her. And then one,
Okay, but the PJ. Now I want to hear the PJ
I'll let you tell the
story.
PJ one, Anna.
Ah,
You wanna
jeez,
tell the
I
PJ
don't even
one?
remember. Yeah. I don't even remember exactly how it happened, but I went out of the apartment for some reason, and then I came back and I realized that I was locked out because I had left my key. And I think I went to take out the trash or something. And then I didn't bring my key with me. So I was locked out of the apartment in my pajamas. And I was like, okay, great. So I'm trying to debate what I'm going to do. Am I going to go to the police? Do I go to the gate? how am I supposed to convey that I'm locked out of my apartment? So I go over to, I think, the security gate, and I'm trying to communicate in signals because I gave up on Mandarin very, very quickly. I was like, okay, I either learn Mandarin or I like living in China. So I decided to try to focus on liking living in China and not try to learn Mandarin. So I go over to the gate and I'm trying to communicate to this guy that I'm locked out of my apartment. I'm pretty sure he didn't believe that I lived in the building. So he brought
He's
over...
like, okay, homeless lady in your pajamas.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so we go over, I tell him like what my apartment number is. And then, I don't know, at one point there were like 2 security guards. I vaguely remember a police officer. Someone called the locksmith and they like opened the door or get a master key. I don't even remember what it was. And then so like I went to the closet to like get my passport to show them like, no, I do live here. Like, yes, this is me. This is my ID. Like, I'm not making this up. This is actually my apartment. I'm not trying to break into a random person's house. But of course, I'm in my pajamas at this point. So like, I don't even know what they thought, but Cameron was like, you should have come to school. Just walk to school and I would have helped you. And I'm like, I'm not walking to school where I work periodically with my pajamas. I'm not doing that.
But that's the ironic thing is that everyone in China walks around in their pajamas. It's socially acceptable. It's a status symbol. So she would have been just fine. But you were locked out for what? Like
They have
3-4
winter
hours?
pajamas, people. They have these thermal winter pajamas that they wear and they walk and they get, their outdoor time. And so I was thinking the same thing, Cam. I was like, she could have just walked to the grocery store in her pajamas. It would have been completely normal.
So, Cam, what happened when you got home that day? Did she break down on you? I mean, you're like teaching math or language arts at the time, and she's locked out, and then you come home and you're like, "Hey, honey, how was your day?" I mean, I can just imagine it's like the breakdown, like, "We're leaving, we're out of here."
It was definitely a breakdown day. It was, it was definitely a stage 2 culture shock day for her, where she was like, "I hate it. I hate everything."
I have a friend that labeled it as getting pecked to death by ducks. All the little things that happen build up, and if you don't have any way of getting the frustration out, if you internalize it, then you might explode. And I've seen teachers explode because of the little things. This is not a little thing, Anna. I'm not belittling your experience. That was a major experience in your pajamas. No, I can totally imagine that. I've had a ton of those. Not pajamas in China, but some other kinds, right? Boy, yeah, pecked to death by ducks. That's what one teacher internationally said is what happens overseas. The little things. It might be the doorknobs. It might be the way someone treated you. It's a miscommunication. It might be a tank in the road in Yemen. There's things like that happen that just happen, and you're like, oh, it's a good thing you had each other to get through that, because when you're single, you don't necessarily have that, right?
Yeah, when you're single, it's a lot harder.
Anna and Cam, you guys have picked up a little bit of wisdom and experience along the way, your international travels, and I understand that you're doing a little something to kind of give back to the community and educate and help people out. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your project to assist other people thinking about jumping into teaching, or people who are new to it?
Yeah, so we run our own website called McGregors.com. We have a blog that's focused, initially started as just sort of a travel blog, but now we still blog about our travels, because as an international teacher, that's one of the big pulls, right? Is that you want to be able to go and not just live in a new country, but travel, and you can, because it's so easy. So we blog a lot about what life is like as an expat. I tend to talk a lot about, not a lot on there, but on Reddit and other places as well, what it's like for me as an only child with older parents, and providing support and ideas for people who are considering moving abroad or abroad, and how do you deal with that? For me, my father just turned 79 and lives by himself, so it's a constant worry for me. So we offer expat advice, and we also have quite a few pages about international teaching, which is sort of, I'd say it is the big main focus of our site, from what are some of the main recruitment agencies, from Search, ISS, GRC being the new player, Teacher Horizons, TES. So we go over some of those. We go over what can you expect at a job fair, what are they like, We talk about what can you reasonably expect from an international school as far as the package goes. Here's things that we look for when we're applying for jobs. Here are some of our red flags, things you need to get started in international education. One of the most frequently asked questions is, do I need experience? And the long answer is yes. And the short answer is no. I mean, what we tell people is it never hurts to apply. You don't lose anything. The worst the school is going to say is no. And if you set really lofty expectations to work at a tier 1, as they say, school, you might not get it. But, my first school was not great by any stretch, but I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about what I wanted out of a school with zero experience. So we talk about those kinds of things. And we do have a course for purchase, ideally for those that are in the US. So I'd say our target base. I guess we could say the UK or, some of the main other countries as well, just to help where we walk through with 10 modules, getting you started in preparing to go abroad, getting your recruitment profile ready. We go over the timeline. We go over attending job fairs. We go over how to contact schools. We don't offer feedback specifically on people's resumes or their cover letters. We're not doing one-to-one feedback, but just sort of a general, all right, here's where we're covering what you need to get started, how you can prepare, and how to go forward once you are ready to make that jump. We talk also a lot about how to talk to your family, because not every family and friends understand the desire to go and live in a new country. We've met plenty of people who their families get upset when they tell them they don't want to leave grandkids, or their friends feel like they're abandoning them. And that's a hard conversation to have. But ultimately, what we tell others is that it's your life and you deserve to be happy in it. And if that means that makes other people upset sometimes, that's something you have to be willing to risk if you want to be happy. So, Anna, what else do we have on there?
Well, the other thing that kind of pushed us to create the course and give people as many answers in one place as possible on how to find international school jobs abroad is the hope that by providing people with that roadmap, teachers that want to stay in the profession and are finding themselves in really tough conditions learn that there are options for them. There are schools out there that have supportive communities. There are schools out there where they can have diverse experiences. There are places out there where they can feed their curiosity and where they can be in a better condition to be the professionals that they want to be. Just because teaching in their home countries is miserable, it doesn't mean that that's the only way to be a teacher in the entire planet. And I think that for a lot of people, they may not know that there is another way, that there are other places where they can continue to be teachers, where they don't have to be in unsupportive communities, where they don't have to be tied to some of the requirements that they're tied to in places like the US, where state testing dictates your job and your funding and all of those things. And I think that a lot of people may be leaving the profession, great teachers that really want to stay simply because it's unsustainable, but they might not know like what else is out there and how can they realistically keep being teachers elsewhere in a way that is more supportive of their goals and their professional ambitions, etc. And so that's why we created this. Like, we want to try, if this can keep one teacher from leaving teaching just because they're frustrated of where they are, then that's great, because we do think that the working conditions shouldn't be what's pushing teachers out of the profession.
So let me be one of the first to welcome you to our circle, because I know your podcast, Nomadic McGregors, which we'll add to our website and our group. Welcome to our circle, because when we found out about you, because I think JP Mint took one of your classes.
Yeah, the first module, I saw their first module on Twitter, and it was free. So I sign up for every webinar that's free. I'm like, let's find out. I'll be the fly on the wall, seeing what this is like. And as it turned out, it was the first module. And I just said, full disclosure, I'm already overseas. I'm retired from international teaching. And we just hit it off. You could see why, right, Greg and Kent? Like, they're just so personable.
Welcome
and
to our
so
group.
I said, let's get you on the show so that we can spread your message and spread the word about you. Because if people want something that's a little bit more detailed, And like you said, I really like that roadmap scenario. If people want to know from A to Z or A to Z how to get into international teaching, boom, they can sign up for your courses and be done. It'll get them overseas.
We have a host of other podcasts and websites in our group. And one of them, Dave and Audrey, are Educators Going Global. It's a podcast. We have a TCK that does Across Oceans. She's a TCK that does her own
Julia
podcast.
Walker.
Julia Walker does that, and she interviews TCKs, right? Third culture kids, the students that we have that have grown up and moved on, and their lives. There's a host of other ones that we keep on our website. We're going to add yours, of course, with your permission. But it's like this little group that we're starting to really offer more for not just people that are going to a recruitment fair, but international teaching and everything that goes with it. We had our first episode with somebody that's like going overseas, or second episode, a person that's going overseas from Australia, and she's going out on her first one, Sarah. Awesome. And that's going to air out pretty soon, or has already. And it was fantastic. So we're making a difference. And I think the two of you are making a difference. So we can go visit you on the list of your podcasts. You have 36 episodes. They're on Google with video, and they're on podcast, I think, podcast platforms like we are. So anybody can find you. And you guys are just sitting on the couch together talking about what it's like to be overseas. It's awesome, right?
Yeah, I mean, and
welcome.
Yeah, I mean, and we don't always talk, like I said, we don't always talk about international education because we also want to give perspective to what the life is like. And so, we talk about expat stuff. We did an episode about, what it was like to travel a little bit during COVID, which feels a bit dated at the moment, although, hopefully history doesn't repeat itself and we don't end up back in those kinds of things. But, we've had a couple of seasons where we focus specifically on here's what you can do for international education. And then now we just have kind of conversations about the things that teachers talk about when they're abroad. How do you manage your retirement? What do you do for that? How do you handle seeing your family back home? Or how do you pay for everything?
You're also like 4 miles away from Kent and I, which is so funny. We're doing the same thing. Our goal is to help people that are interested in doing what we're doing. And that's why we call it the best kept secret in education, because it really is.
The best
right?
kept secret in education, www.amazon.com, or wherever you buy your finer books. Gregory L. Lemoyne,
You guys need to write
PhD,
books.
MS,
If you haven't written a book yet, write a book about overseas.
MA,
It's
BA,
great. He's going to
BS.
keep going. But it's like a family, you guys, and I welcome you, and I'm enjoying your podcast. I'm at about 5 different episodes so far, and I think our audience should just switch over and start listening to you guys as well as ours, because you give it a different flavor. It's the same kind of idea. What's out there? Like, what's this great secret? You guys are hitting the same things we are from a different point of view, from a teaching couple. And I love that. Right, guys? Right? Welcome to the IP crowd. Yeah.
Thanks. It's
We
good
got
to be
Greg
here.
the single guy, Kent the cat guy, and Cam and Anna the teaching couple.
Can we do 2 questions, though? I know we've gone quite a long time, and we could talk to you for another, 3 hours. But can we do
like
some
I said,
questions
we got all the
for
time.
you?
Our grades are done.
This is welcome to the first 3-hour International Teacher Podcast episode, everybody. Just strap in.
Well, if we don't cut it, my mom's going to get confused. If we don't cut it at least to an hour, my mom will be like, what's going on, Greg? JP, what's our first question that we ask guests?
So, in all your travels, Cam and Anna, have you got 3 things that you need to feel comfortable in your new situation?
That's a great question.
Ooh, it is a great question.
And it's funny because Cameron is the person that is in charge of getting our apartment home as soon as we get there. He takes a day and a half and we're set, and he just does everything.
Professional.
Wow.
So what are they, Cam?
I would say first and foremost is, I sort of encompass this into one thing, even though it's more than one, is coffee. And finding...
Okay. That went totally... I was thinking internet. You were like, coffee.
Coffee. So finding, if we don't, we don't always take our little espresso maker with us, or we'll buy one new, but finding good coffee, Starbucks is fine when you're abroad. It's what it is. But if I can find a nice little roaster, there's one here that I love. It's the only place I buy coffee anymore here. So that's one. Two, I would say, and I think Ana would agree with me, is making sure we have a decent TV. I like to play a lot of video games, and we watch a lot of TV in the background. So having a nice TV where we can come home and just sort of decompress is really important for me anyway. And Ana might, okay, that's more me. I want one of those massive TVs, but we're not there yet.
No, it's me too, because like we watch sports on the TV, and some of that is mostly me. So yeah, the TV is important. We watch. I have to admit it's important. Now I admit it's fine.
I have one piece of advice. Can I before you give number 3? I started years back. I think my 3rd year of teaching, some 20-some years ago. I started carrying a projector with me. And I project, because every apartment I've ever lived in has one white wall. So you buy local speakers, and you don't even have to buy a TV when you get there, but you can buy small projectors, and they're HD now. And it's perfect for video games because you can do it the size of the wall. I'm sitting in like Kuwait in this empty apartment the first day, but I'm playing my Xbox on the wall, the size of this massive wall. It was perfect. No TV. So that's just, anyway, TV is important. Coffee, what's number 3?
Number 3 is maybe a toss-up for me.
More coffee?
Between a good pillow. I find that I can. It's always hard to find a good pillow when I go internationally. I think here we've bought 4 or 5 pillows. We bought 4 or 5. China, I don't know how many trips we made to IKEA. Yeah, they're just terrible. And so I'd say either a pillow or, and I know Ana will get behind me on this one, kitchen appliances. And because Ana is a big cook, I handle the dishes and she cooks. And so making sure we have all the right tools for her to cook at home, because we cook a lot at home. A lot of international teachers eat out. We're sort of the opposite.
Trying to get that microwave in the upper, above the seats in the airplane must be tough, though. Right?
It's tough. It's tough. But
and the dishwasher, that sucks. That's a little weighty, right, for travel.
We've lugged around, pots and pans, a few pots and pans. We buy some high quality ones. We lug around here and there. But making sure whenever we get settled in, one of the first things we buy is a nice food processor, a nice blender, an Instant Pot or something similar that allows us to really cook. Allows her to cook and for me to clean and enjoy the dishes. So.
All right, we got our 3. That's 4 now. I don't know if we can go farther. Okay.
Whoa. This is going into like 3 hours.
Here's our second famous question. Do you have any police stories or customs stories that you want to share with us? Nothing too personal, right?
Well, I think we do. Yeah. So we have a China story and we have a Cuba story. So the China story was, I don't know how notorious this might be, but we did get asked for our passports twice. Once when we were on the street on a random day, and then the next time we had someone knock on our door and asking to check our passports, and we're like, huh? And they're like, oh, we're checking that the people that are registered at the police station are the people that are living here, so we need to see your passport. So we're like, okay, here you go. But it was just
they had our passport numbers written down. They had them written down.
They looked official
before we got there.
Yeah.
Well, I assume they were because they had the numbers already. So
police.
They had a uniform.
And that was China.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was China.
And that happened to me in
Were
Russia
you in your
as well. It wasn't uncommon.
No. No PJs.
You're making coffee in your PJs.
And then the Cuba story was just coming through, like entering the country. Like, it is by far the most intimidating immigration line I have ever seen. It is dark and like tunnely, and there's very little to look around. So, we're in 2 separate lines because at the time I wasn't a US citizen, so I was with my Dominican passport and he was with his American passport. They knew who he was as soon as he got to the thing, like they knew his name, and I'm like, okay. And then I made the rookie mistake of explaining that I worked at a nonprofit. And we were turned around like 3 or 4 times and questioned, I don't know how many times, of what we were going to do. Are we going to visit universities? Who are we talking to in the island? Where are we staying? Am I going to organize any meetings? And I'm like, no. No, but like they were trying to like see if we were gonna trip over our answers, but I shouldn't have said that. Cameron always tells me like, don't offer any information that anybody's not asking you. So honestly, like I shouldn't have said anything, but yeah, I said, because at the time I worked at a nonprofit, so I gave an honest answer because I'm a terrible liar, first of all, and I don't think that you should lie to immigration authorities. So I told the truth, but they were not super keen on that. They were like, they were sure that I was gonna like meet with the university or something. I'm like, no, we're just here on vacation.
So they questioned us for an hour. They questioned us for an hour just at the luggage carousel. 2 guys in uniforms. And then right as they were about to let us go, they said, let us call our boss over. Some guy in jeans and a t-shirt comes over and asks us the same questions for about 15 minutes. They finally let us go. We get our bags. We go through and we're exchanging money. And the guy in t-shirt and jeans runs back out and then proceeds to ask the same questions for another 30 minutes while we're already outside at this point. And then, so that was, we felt okay when we got out. And then we're staying at like a homestay. And I don't know, 3 days in, there's like a loud knock on our door. And the host is like in Spanish, she's like, oh, there's somebody out there looking for a gringo, looking for a blonde gringo. And so I'm freaking out in the middle of the night. And it just turns out there was another guy staying at the homestay that was getting a taxi to the airport.
What's wrong, blonde gringo?
Then you're in the airport bathroom, and the guy is next to you in the stall asking you questions then. And then you go scuba diving, and then he's asking you underwater. Then you go horseback riding, and he's asking you more questions. Is this guy just following you? Wow.
It certainly felt that way.
Let's take it around the horn here. JP Mint, final thoughts from you.
Well, I just want to thank our guests for the very short notice, because we just met, I think, this week. And I said, hey, you guys want to come on the show? So fantastic to have you on. And I really hope that, as Greg says, you join the ITP family. Greg, final thoughts?
Oh, I'm just waiting. I'm scared about the guy in Cuba following me and asking me questions, like the guy in jeans and a t-shirt. I don't know. I enjoyed this so much. We'll have to have you back on. And what you're giving back to our community, you're doing very much what we are doing in a different way and a good way. So I applaud what you guys are doing. I'll be an avid listener of your podcast.
Let's turn to our guest. Cam, why don't you give us any final thoughts or advice to the teaching audience out there?
Well, first, let me say thank you guys for having us. It's great to be here. We're going to get, if it's okay with you guys, we'll add you guys' podcast to our site as well. And my teaching advice to those who are looking to come out is just go for it. I mean, the worst that can happen is that a school says no, and you're right back where you were before. As a teacher, there's always going to be a spot for you somewhere. So you got nothing to lose and everything to gain from a world of new experiences that you'd never, ever would have thought.
Thanks, Cam. Anna, why don't you wrap us up? Words of wisdom from you, Anna?
I mean, teaching is an incredibly rewarding profession, but teaching abroad is like the elevated experience of teaching, where there is so much more that goes into your life experiences that makes you a better teacher by doing directly with your students in your regular life. It makes you more adaptable to change. I am a million times more relaxed as a person and easygoing than I ever was before becoming an international teacher. It's not just like a rewarding experience professionally and financially. It really does make you a better person, a more flexible person, a more open-minded person. So like, if you're a teacher and you want to grow as a person, go abroad. It'll change your life for real.
Well,
fantastic.
ITP crowd, we've done it again. I would like to thank our special guests, Anna and Cam. You could find them at McGregors. That's GREGORS, nomadicgregors.com, where you could find their podcast videos and course modules about international teaching. I'd like to thank our guests. I'd like to thank our host, JP Mint. You could find her at jpmintconsulting.com. I'd also like to thank Greg, the single guy. You could find his newest book, International Teaching, the Best Kept Secret in Education, from www.amazon.com or wherever you buy your finer books. I'm Kent the Cat Guy, and you can find me, as always, in room 402. We'll see you next time. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well done, you
Thank you
guys.
guys.
What an awesome time. Hang on a second here.